Here we go. Alrighty, so I'm going to mainly talk a lot about food labels today. So before we get started, how do you guys feel about using food labels? Do you use them often? Just give me a little bit about, where you're at with all of this.
Yeah, the furthest that I get into food labels is really just the macro aspect.
Okay.
And I don't usually look past that too much.
Okay. So mainly looking at like serving size and your macros.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, same.
Okay. Awesome. So today I'm really just going to get into, a little bit of background first, and then we'll get into, there's a new food label out and talk a little bit about the changes that were made. And then just certain things with macronutrients and micronutrients. And then some of the different labels that are out there that can be confusing, like organic, natural, gluten-free. So if you guys have any questions while I'm going through this, just let me know, but I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
I am gluten-free, just as a
You are?
aside, so I do. I mean, I do read for ingredients.
Awesome. Yeah, we might have you talk a little bit about that later. But good to know. Can you guys see it?
No, not yet.
Interesting. Okay, we will get it. Okay, how about now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, so going into a little bit of the background, just a generic timeline. I just wanted to show like how long it's taken for food labels to be developed, especially in America. So in 1862, like Lincoln started the idea to regulate food. And he created the USDA, which is the United States Department of Agriculture, just in response to a lot of foodborne illness. Like at this point, everyone was making food at home for the most part. But as restaurants and production started to ramp up, the need for regulating like food, processed foods became a much higher demand. So pretty much in 1906, the Food and Drugs Act passed, prohibiting interstate commerce for any misbranded, adulterated foods, drinks, and drugs. So anything that was wishy-washy and could cause potential harm or danger was prohibited. And then I'm going to skip ahead to 1966, where the USDA mandated a list of all ingredients on products. So before we saw like the nice little grid and panel that we have now, it was just a list of ingredients on anything that was processed. So moving on to 1973, like there was a ton of false claims being out there. So like people saying this food can, prevent cancer, not a ton of research at this time, right? So it became a big issue. And it's still somewhat of an issue today, but there's definitely a lot more evidence-based research out there and a lot more regulation. But then in 1990 was when the USDA developed the first food label with the FDA. So it's only really been around for a few years, considering. So it took quite a while to get there. But essentially the rules of a food label, you have to have a statement of identity pretty much saying this is what this food is and this is what's in this food, a required nutrition facts chart, which is the same standardized chart we all see with all foods, and then the list of ingredients used in a product. It has to be printed in English and it cannot have inappropriate claims. So there's essentially 4 different serving sizes. There's 4 different components to a food label. The serving size to help us with portions, calorie information to also help us with portions and calculate the energy we get from food, and then nutrient amounts. And the ones that are highlighted are fats, cholesterol, sodium, total carbs. So total dietary fiber is in there because fiber is a carb, and total sugars as well is part of carbohydrates. So protein is the last one. And then vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium are just a few of the nutrients that they've chose to highlight. So then the percent daily value, does anyone know what this means? We'll get into this a little bit later. Okay, no worries. So it's essentially the percentage of the how much of that nutrient is in a serving, and how much contributes to our total daily intake of a particular nutrient. So there is a new food label. This idea was updated in 2016, just to sort of, reflect current evidence with diet and chronic disease. When they made it in 1990, there's just a lot of outdated information. So they chose to, change a few things. And it's taken a while to, get into all the food manufacturing products. But as of January 1st, 2020, all large name manufacturers have to use this. So this is the only food label we will see from here on out. So the changes that were made particularly involve the serving size. It's bolded, it's bigger. Portion sizes in the past were a lot smaller than they are now. So companies tried to make it realistic for Americans. So serving sizes are typically bigger and they reflect what we would eat, because before it was like a half little fun size bag of chips was one serving. Now they just made it the full bag and calculated for that energy accordingly. Calories are much bigger, just because obesity is huge, as well as malnutrition is huge in other aspects. So paying more attention to the energy we're getting from food was definitely a priority with the new food label as well. The daily values have been updated as, portion sizes changed to reflect, needs based on a 2,000 calorie diet. And then added sugars was also incorporated under total carbohydrate. And this is just to, monitor those simple sugars that we're intaking, whether it be like table sugar from salt or table sugar from like your sodas or candy, what have you. Those that spike your blood sugar higher and have quite a lot less nutrients, they chose to look at those as well. And then they changed up the vitamins of importance. Back in the day, we'll go to the next slide, it was vitamin A, C, calcium, and iron, because scurvy was a huge thing growing up, which is a form of malnutrition when you have no vitamin C. But they chose to focus on vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium because those are included in processed foods. Iron and vitamin D and calcium are added to dairy products, and iron and potassium are actually added to processed foods, especially like flour and cereals and grains. So, any questions before we get started? Keep going, I guess. All right. So, fats, adults typically get less than 30%. Or they are recommended less than 30% of their daily calories per day. The food label shows both saturated and total fat. Does anyone know the difference between unsaturated and saturated fat? Okay, so unsaturated fats are typically your healthier fats. They come from like, plant-based oils, And your saturated fats are like solid at room temperature. So think like your butters, animal fats, like the marbling of the fat in your cuts of like red meat. So and trans fats are part of saturated fats, but they have been prohibited from being included in food products and food labels just due to their those are like your Cisco's, your superhydrogenated oils, lard, just to reduce total fat intake. But claims surrounding fat, if you see a low fat label, it's typically 3 grams or less of total fat in the food product. Low to saturated fat is less than 1 gram or less than 1 gram, with 15% of calories coming from fat. Lean, you'll find this on like your meats, typically meats, dairy, but anything less than 10 grams of total fat and 4.5 grams of saturated fat and less than 95 milligrams of cholesterol per serving are going to be lean. And then extra lean takes it down to less than 5 grams of total fat and 2 grams of saturated fat. So sodium is another one I wanted to point out just because of excess sodium, causes, it predisposes you to hypertension, and other chronic disease like your kidneys, kidney failure, what have you. But the general recommendation for average adults in America is less than 2,300 milligrams per day. So think like 2.3 grams. So tips for wanting to monitor your sodium: look for low sodium foods, and those are labeled. And if you remember less than 140 milligrams per serving, you should be good if you stick to those types of foods versus like the less than 400 milligrams, which is moderate, and then high, we want to sort of stay away from those at greater than 400 milligrams per serving. So getting into percent daily value, like I said, it shows how much of each nutrient in one serving contributes to total daily diet. So 10 to 19% is a good source. So over here, let's see, it would be like your total fat, that's a good source. Total carbohydrate is a good source, but over 20% is excellent. So the calcium down here is over 20%. Now with it being saturated fat, this is the 20% that doesn't apply to like your saturated or trans fats as well. So it's all based on a 2,000 calorie diet, and it is variable to, your nutrition needs. So if you're eating less than 2,000 calories or more than 2,000 calories, these values don't necessarily pertain to you. So you would have to calculate those on your own if you're super interested. But typically, if you're following a well-balanced diet, you are going to get these in. And I know most of you are tracking right now, so you can track the amounts of your macros. You've been doing that, but you can also look at your micro amounts as well, and record them that way if you'd prefer. So other label claims are your low calorie. So the FDA, if anything says low calorie, it still has somewhat of it has some energy in it. All that means is it has to be less than 5 calories per serving. So if you are eating quite a bit of a low calorie food, just keep in mind that those calories can still add up. It won't be a super significant amount, but just know like when you're tracking, you can be like, oh, I might have had like 20 to 30 extra calories. So high, if you see that on a label, like high calcium, it has to contain 20% or more of percent daily value. And then anything reduced, like reduced fat milk, reduced fat chips, anything like that, the food has been altered to take out at least 25% of a certain component. And then light, it can pertain to less calories, fat, or sodium, but it'll be 1/3 to 1/2 less than what's in the original product.
there's a couple people waiting in the waiting room. And then when you let them in, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so a long time ago when I was, sorry, I'm walking right now, so it might be like winded. But a long time ago when I was like just diving into like the health and fitness realm, I remember the whole like net carbs thing going on with talking about however many grams of fiber were in that nutrition label or that product, you would subtract that amount of carbs for that food. Have you ever heard that?
The little body, but I think you're talking about net carbs with fiber and carbs, right?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, that is a thing. Patty, you're a little mute, like you're a little spotty.
Am I so spotty?
Yeah. But pretty much what she's saying is the thing with net carbs is it's comparing your total carbohydrate to the amount of dietary fiber. So why they do this is because when we process carbs, when we eat carbs, they're, absorbed into our bloodstream, right? So fiber typically slows down the digestion of our carbs, and it prevents our blood sugar from spiking too much. So if we have a lot of sugar, no fiber, our blood sugar is going to sort of go up, it's going to spike and then it's going to crash. If we have decent amount of carbs, decent amount of fiber, it's going to be more gradual. And when we come down, it's not going to spike or it's not going to plummet. So there are things out there like Carb Balance. You see like tortillas. What else? Just like Carb Balance bread or the Carb Master products that you see like maybe at Kroger. I definitely know that they have like their own brand. But
Most like specialty keto products do.
yes.
Right. So you feel like that's more of like a marketing standpoint to say this is like low carb because we're subtracting the fiber intake. You feel like that's what it's more about? Because I feel like at first I believed it and I was like, yeah, this has like only 5 grams of carbs because it has like 10 grams of fiber or whatever. And then as I started like getting more into this, I was like, wait, you can't subtract. Like the carbs are carbs, but you can't subtract how many's in it because of fiber.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a marketing strategy. They sort of took that science and just ran with it. But the carbs you're eating are still carbs. The fiber is just going to help you digest them. And it's going to give you extra benefits like reducing cholesterol, having a healthier heart. But overall, like the marketing standpoint, that's where that is. So if you were to track something that is carb balanced, you wouldn't change anything, right? You're just going to plug in the amount of carbs on the food label with the amount of serving that you're eating and go from there. But food labels can be, yeah.
Thanks for clearing that up because I feel like a lot of people fall for that too of like, subtracting fiber from their carbs and think they have like less carbs taking in. But so thank you for clearing that up because I know I fell for that when I was first diving into all this.
Yeah, definitely. No
And
problem.
some of the keto groups too, they say like insoluble fiber because you don't absorb it or whatever. That doesn't count, I think. I'm not sure, but they've also got other like ways to try and explain it.
Yeah, the keto thing's huge right now. So however they're going to capitalize on any type of food, they're going to. So even though like inaccurate health claims are, regulated and are against the law, there's so many that are far-fetched. So that's sort of what I'm getting to with like, I know it's tedious and kind of dry, but with some of these like labels and just like the claim definitions and the meanings behind some of these claims, I think just knowing a little bit about what they are versus like, so like when you do go to the grocery store, you can be like, oh, like this is the science behind this, or like this is the meaning behind this. So I don't like get overwhelmed when looking at. Sorry, I just got really jumbled right there. But I wanted to pretty much just help you guys clarify like what some of these specialty like claims are or what common wordage is used on food labels, so you have a better idea when you go into the store. But if you have any other questions about different marketing things, like with keto or just anything in general that comes to mind, just blurb them out, because I definitely think we could all benefit from talking about them. So when we go forward, so that was sort of a good combo to go into the fat-free and sugar-free claims. So be wary with these. If something is a sugar-free or fat-free product, if sugar or fat is reduced, typically the other one is amplified. So sugar-free products, they have the sugar alcohols, right, or artificial sweeteners, but they might have less sugar, but they're going to have a little bit more fat, right, because fat is flavor. When you take out sugar, you need something else to either stabilize the product or make it taste better. So your calories are typically going to remain the same, but your macronutrients will be a little bit different. So, I mean, my blurb of advice is, if you prefer a fat-free or sugar-free product over the other, that's totally fine. But I recommend just sort of getting the normal amount, the regular item, and just watching your portions with it. But like with fat-free products, they're going to have more sugar content to enhance the flavor as well. So same thing, vice versa. But for them to be labeled as fat or sugar-free, they have to have less than 0.5 grams per serving. So any questions with this one? Have you noticed this like in your own tracking? Like, was there a problem?
That's really good, because I feel like a lot of people will just see like, oh, fat-free or sugar-free, and they forget that it can literally just go one to the other. So like if it's fat-free, well, you're gonna have more sugar, or if it's sugar-free, you might have a little more fat in there. And I remember meticulously looking at labels like that when I was on prep, because we had to be very precise. So like if I had more carbs left in the day, I'd be like, oh, well, I have to go choose, the sugar-free one or, fat-free one. So I had more carbs to go with it, rather than when I was short on fats, I had to choose the fat-free one. So stupid stuff right there, but that is so important, because I don't think we would ever notice that had we not been tracking, understanding what ingredients and what makes up the foods that we're eating.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know bodybuilding, like you had to be super strict. So like that would be confusing. But I remember just like growing up, everything in my house was like pretty fat-free. Like my mom, like through the 90s, everything was pretty fat-free in itself. And that was the new trend. And the whole emphasis in nutrition and dieting was just lowering fat. So like, as I've gotten older, I've also just like started to realize, work out of those fat-free things and incorporate, the regular ones into my diet in moderation. But it was ingrained to me that fat-free was better. Those products were better, but essentially the nutrition can be totally different when looking at the label. So
right, but at the end of the day, the calories could be the same, like to an
Right.
extent, and honestly could be the same. So that's a good point too, like how we grew up. So like I'm in my later 20s, and like when I was growing up, it was that whole fat-free, like everything was fat-free. And later, until I got to college, I started seeing all like the sugar-free stuff. So it just kind of like that trend through the diet culture is like, fats are bad. And then it's like, oh wait, fats aren't bad. No, sugar's bad. So, just to demystify that too, like what you're saying is like, it's either one. If you remove one of those, it's a calorie deficit. So pick your poison. Which one do you want to remove?
True. But it just goes to show like how powerful marketing can be, especially with food. My mom would grab those items being like, oh, those are healthier, but never looking at the food label. If you looked at the food label, it's like clear as day, like, oh, not much is really different, but the food system just wants us to get their products and buy them. So it just goes to show these labels they don't always make it seem like what's really going on. So
Right, like isn't there with diet sodas and stuff too, where like doesn't your body's still processing, it's not nothing. even though they, like on the can, it'll say it's nothing.
Right. So there's still, with that, there's sort of conflicting evidence right now. With diet soda, sugar alcohols are, processed similarly as sugar. They just don't carry as much of the weight, like of carbs, pretty much. But there are things that out there right now that suggest like it affects your gut microbiome. It affects like your mood, your appetite. There's stuff out there suggesting that the more artificial sweeteners you're having, the bigger your appetite for like sweets in general is. So I can't say yes or no because they are sort of like digested similarly. They do have side effects like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headaches, just artificial sugars in general. But like there's other things out there though that suggest that they alter like your want for food and your appetite and the foods you sort of gravitate towards. So, but honestly, if someone was trying to lose weight and they're addicted to pop, I've seen this in the clinic. As of right now, like sugar alcohols don't, cause cancer. That was a big myth, right? We can't say anything does or doesn't specifically cause cancer, but the study that was done in with aspartame, which was a huge one, was done like on rats, and it was a microdose. And as humans, we would never consume that much aspartame in one sitting or one day, even if we made a conscious effort. So those results suggesting that the sugar alcohols led to cancer aren't necessarily accurate. That was just something the food industry sort of tagged onto. And I know sugar alcohols are a pretty big fear for people right now, but I don't know. If someone was looking to lose weight who drank, I had a patient drinking 11 pops a day, switching to diet would probably be good for them. But if you want to avoid eating, like consuming sugar alcohols or sugars in general and confusing your body, then, and you're in a good place to do that, then, suggesting more natural alternatives for beverages would probably be better. I went on sort of a tangent with that, but did that like answer your question in a way?
Yeah, definitely. Cause you hear people talk about like how it affects your brain and stuff too. So I was just curious about that.
Absolutely. So any other questions or comments with that? Sugar alcohols in particular?
I got a question, and I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm just confused myself because I don't know if you follow BioLane. He is like that research scientist that was always posting, and if you guys can't hear me, I'm walking in the wind, but he's always posting like all this like science stuff, like research-based evidence, and he always says that like diet sodas aren't bad for you. And I don't know what is right? Like he's providing a bunch of research-based evidence that it's not bad for you. But then I've also seen evidence saying that like the sugar alcohols are much more impactful than just regular sugar because they're heightened. So like even a smaller amount, they're still like 10 times the taste of like regular sugar. So your brain still thinks that you're getting the same amount of sugar or something like that. So what are your honest opinions? Like what's the level of safe or not safe, or I don't know, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that because I'm unsure myself. Like I try to form my own opinion, but then I don't know.
No, that's a good question. It's a very hot topic. I would definitely say if you're used to drinking sugar sweetened beverages constantly, right? Those sugars are concentrated. Those are going to spike your blood sugar and cause probably the most dramatic effect in your body. Just with, the predisposition to obesity, diabetes, which ultimately leads to like kidney disease, could lead to kidney failure. Just sugar in general right now, especially concentrated sugar, like without the fiber and the other nutrients, that leads to more chronic disease than the research out there for sugar alcohols. And I haven't looked at his page, so I definitely could educate myself a little bit more with some of his stuff. But as of now, and as of my understanding, sugar honestly is more harmful than salt in a way. And I don't want to use the word harmful or toxic or put a bad stigma around
Right.
it, because it's good in moderation. But I would say ingesting, the regular soda or the regular sweet teas, like quite a bit every day, that's going to cause a more dramatic effect than the sugar alcohols, unless you have a huge, reaction to sugar alcohol. A lot of people can get headaches, diarrhea is a big one, nausea, vomiting, just like GI issues, constipation. But as of now, I would say sugar in that like capacity, like as in like concentrated in a lot at once,
Yeah.
over a long period of time is way more detrimental to your body. But
Yeah.
evidence is sort of limited with sugar alcohols, like they're newer, and the evidence is like in the middle. There's some that say it's the worst thing, there's some that say it's not harmful at all. So it's just contradictory right now. And
Yeah.
there is no like black and white, like they're good, they're bad answer. For every client, I would suggest something different. If someone wants to take a more holistic approach, I mean, I don't recommend many sodas or flavored beverages at all, just stick to water, coffee, teas. But if someone has, severe obesity, like I've seen a lot of people in the clinic, I worked at a bariatric clinic. Someone was drinking 11 pops a day. So for them, the next step might be switch the diet. That person switched the diet and they ended up losing like 30 pounds, just because they're used to that. And that was just a serious reduction of calories in itself. So
Right.
it
I
depends
can't even imagine.
and their goals. I know that was a wild one. I never will forget, but yeah, it definitely depends where you're at, what you believe in, where you want to go. Like for each client, I would say, until is like they're bad, or they're good.
I want to add in too that like I have worked with a functional medicine doctor, and I'm also working with Lacey Dunn right now. She is like a functional physician and a registered dietitian, and both people I've worked with, they've told me to reduce or make sure I don't have any sugar alcohols. So like in my current gut protocol right now, like I can't have like artificial sugars. And at first, like I was that person that was getting that pump, like when you go to like Starbucks and get your coffee or whatever, you get that like I'll have 1 or 2 pumps or like whatever, like of the sweetener. But now like when I remove it, I will only get that on occasion, like if I'm really like I want something like spiced up. But once you remove it, you don't actually like crave it anymore. Like I truly don't. Like I just get it basically plain or with oat milk. And I feel like there's a reason for that too. Like if I'm having a gut protocol and I'm trying to heal my gut, sugar alcohols can't be good for you if you already have like a weakened system or something like that, which not everybody, is dealing with the same thing that I am. But if you feel like you might have issues, like you probably shouldn't do that or have it as much if it is something that's harder for your body to work with.
Yeah, there's 2 things that I want to touch on with what you said. The first one, it was how it affects your gut. There's like a ton of like the gut is this new interest in nutrition and just like in the medical field in general. So there is like early developmental info on sugar alcohols affecting gut health. It's just hard to stay consistent and get like reproduction with data just because gut health is affected by so many things, so evidence with that is sort of like new, and I definitely think it does affect your gut for sure. But yeah, if you go to functional doctors versus an MD, you know the difference, right? Like they're looking at more of the whole picture and they're going to suggest those things versus your normal doctor just because of protocols, in clinical and healthcare. But no, that's interesting. Have you felt any different?
Honestly, I am only on week 2 of like this protocol, and I don't have to change too much about my food other than I can't have like Chipotle or like eat like salads from a salad bar that I've been out for a while because those have a little bit more germs in them.
Okay.
So I don't know if I ever really explained what we found from doing the stool testing, but I basically have H. pylori, which I think they said about 60% of people have it. It's just, it's only bad if you start to show symptoms. So I definitely was showing symptoms like burping after meals. And like, I don't need to talk about my bowels, but like, shit wasn't right. So that was like my symptoms. And then they also found there's a secretory hormone that I don't have. I don't produce it anymore. And then basically just a general like dysbiosis in the lower part of my GI. So essentially I have this H. pylori, right? This virus, parasite, whatever it really is. And my body's also not really absorbing and maximizing all the nutrients that I give it. So that kind of like further creates a problem of like, I can be eating really well, but my body is not absorbing and utilizing a lot of what I'm giving it. So that's kind of where the issue stem or what it is. So the protocol is basically a bunch of like supplements right now, to be honest, because we're trying to build up my immune system and then detox H. pylori. And then the last phase will be like 4 weeks later. And that's where we kill off everything. And that's like everything. So that's what it is. But I don't have like strict like food protocols, which is nice, other than just like, hey, avoid the foods that might be more contaminated. But
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Like, especially with how it can irritate your gut and affect your flora. You'll have to let us know how that works out. I'm interested though. Like, I'm gonna look into that a little bit more and see what's out there.
yeah, it's
just
very interesting.
with the gut biome and everything.
Yeah. So like it even tests the probiotics that you have in your body. So I don't have one of like this probiotic. So that is like the one probiotic that I'm taking. So there's like multiple strands of probiotics you can take, and I'm taking that specific one. So that's really interesting because I feel like a lot of people, they feel like they've got issues. They just give themselves a bunch of like all these different million strands of probiotics when it really boils down to like, which one are you actually like, don't have enough of, or maybe you have too much, because you could further harm your body and your gut by taking ones that you don't really need, that you have an overproduction of. But I think Greg had a question about the gummy vitamins, and I'll let you answer that. And then if you don't answer, get to the point where I'm going to get to, I'll tap in. So I'll let you answer that.
Okay. Oh, the chat. I see it. Okay. Gummy vitamins, like Greg, are you talking about like the sugar alcohols and gummy vitamins?
Yeah.
Okay. Just like I would say the same thing, honestly, as with like sugar alcohols and beverages, and other foods. So I don't know. I don't think a gummy vitamin, Caddy might have a different opinion on this than me, but I don't think a gummy vitamin is like a big enough portion to really affect much. It could affect your gut flora, maybe like how Caddy was talking about with, all sugar alcohols possibly having that effect. But regarding that, I don't think they're super nutritionally like dense or significant that they're gonna really throw things off. But I don't know, Caddy, what were you gonna say about it?
I was just going to say, like, for all my clients, I suggest not to opt for those, because sometimes they're either the same price or a little more expensive, and you're getting a bunch of binders in it, and you're getting a bunch of fluff. Like, do you need cellulose gum in these products? Like, when you're trying to get vitamins, you might as well just like get the best bang for your buck and get the actual whole vitamin that you're looking for, or make sure there's no blended products in there. There's no filler ingredients, because if you're really truly trying to optimize your health and you're taking it in a vitamin supplement form, I would just say steer away from gummies when you could, like, there's better alternatives out there. Now, as far as like the impact on sugar, like she said, that's really not that significant. I think maybe you get 1 gram, maybe there's 1 gram on one of those gummies for sugar. So like if we're looking at the sugar content, like, no, that's not going to be a huge deal. That's going to like break your bank or like throw your body off guard. But it's more about the quality. Like when you can choose other options and get raw form, you might as well choose that. Or for my women, I specifically like give them recommendations for prenatals that are methylated forms. Like I dive deep into those type of ingredients because I've had to care through what I've done. So you might not be at that state, and that's okay, right? Like I don't expect everyone to go through all their like supplements right now and like throw this or that out, right? Like you can get to a point where you'll start to care like that, but that'll be something like in your journey you can get to. It doesn't have to be like drop everything now and get rid of anything that has fillers in it, but just something to be mindful of.
No, that's a good point though, like with the concentration. I didn't think about that. You're just gonna get more bang for your buck with like a capsule or regular and like a, what else are they called? Just
I
like
think
a
raw
capsule or
tablet.
tablet.
Yeah,
Yes,
tablets.
thank you, tablet. Hard. Words are hard. But Greg, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Anything else before we move on? Okay. So this was just an example after we went on that tangent. So regular, these little Cape Cod chips I had in the last slide, the regular, I mean, they're going to be 20 calories more. We're saving, you know, with the reduced, we're saving 3 grams of fat, but our total carbohydrates went up too. So honestly, in the grand scheme of things, if we have one package, we're not going to really see a huge difference in macros between the regular and reduced, but you will notice that they are low fat, so there are slightly higher carbs. So, all right, so the next thing that we typically look for with a food label, it's not on the chart, but it's typically below it or beside it, depending on the type of product, is the ingredients list. So these lists are made, I don't know if you guys know how they're formulated, but it's the list of food ingredients from the largest amount like of the ingredient in the product to the least. So in this particular item, corn flour is the largest, folic acid is the least. So, and then your common allergens are in bold, like wheat, dairy, and tree nuts, peanuts, all those things. So I must not have typed that out. Any questions with this? Alrighty. So when looking, okay, this is a fun game that I like to do. One of my professors did this forever ago. But shoot, it showed up. I was gonna have you guess the ingredients. Just based from the ingredients, I was gonna have you guess the product. Let me stop sharing my screen for 1 second and I'll just fix that for you.
I think you have to put it in presentation mode for them to not show up.
Yeah, I'm just gonna, you're right. Okay, we're back in action. Can you see it? Okay, so the first one was definitely peanut butter. You saw the answer. What do we think this one is? You can take any guesses.
Cheerios.
Yes. Yep, you are totally right. Did you see it on the side or did you get that?
No, my son eats a lot of Cheerios.
Oh, that's awesome. Good. So we recognize that. Yep, that's awesome. And then this last one, what do we think? This one's a tough one. We can even do like a similar family of foods. Hint, the first ingredient is water. It's mostly water.
Is it jelly? Or like Jello?
No, close. Fish. Think of like Whole Foods.
Watermelon.
The three main ingredients are water, sugar, and fatty acids. I'll take one more guess. You guys probably hate me right now, but
Is it coconut water? I don't know.
hey, close, close. We're in, so it's a strawberry. And
Aw.
yeah, so a lot of us probably don't recognize it because strawberries typically don't come with an ingredient list, right? But this was to bring up my point that when we're looking at the ingredient list, we want to be mindful, right? There are ingredients that some of us are avoiding due to many reasons, whether they be medical, personal, religious, cultural, what have you. There is like a long wise tale, like the shorter amount of ingredients, the better. And yes, that is true sometimes, but chemicals are in everything. So when we see a long list like this and assume, it's something wild, it's actually all natural, right? So there's a big stigma between chemicals right now going on that like we don't want chemicals in our body, yet our body's made up of a ton of natural chemicals. So I encourage you just to keep it simple, right? Like if there are ingredients you want to avoid for your own personal reasons, avoid them. But if you don't recognize something, don't automatically assume it's terrible for you. There's that thing people are saying, like, if you can't read it, don't eat it. But to be honest, I don't know what gamma dot egg cal, whatever this word is right here. I can't really pronounce that super well. But I eat strawberries probably every week. So I encourage you just choose whole over processed most of the time if that's possible for you. And then if you do choose, if you do look at ingredients for a particular reason, like you can look at the length, but don't let that be like your only reason. Consider the length of the ingredients, but at the same time, know that Whole Foods also have quite a long list of ingredients as well. So was that surprising to anybody? Like, what do you guys think? How do you feel about ingredients lists and whatnot? Like, what's your approach?
I read a lot of labels, but mostly just for gluten containing things, but also for my son, if I'm going to buy stuff, I don't want high fructose corn syrup and, like more natural ingredients. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, whether it's for us or somebody else, we all have ingredients that we choose to stay away from. But I'm sure you're a pro at reading food labels with gluten in itself.
Yeah, because they try to fool you sometimes.
They definitely do. And not all of them are super accurate, which kind of stinks. But like getting into the gluten-free, like it's all products might not be gluten-free. The ones that are certified gluten-free, they have less than 20 parts per million. So it's not even saying that like free does not mean nothing. Free means there's just less than the regulated amount. So they do try to trick you. There are confusing ingredients like with wheat, like some people don't know malt has gluten in it, unless you're typically looking at that yourself. But yeah. Any other thoughts with ingredient lists? Like, do you guys have another philosophy?
I would agree with her. What she says, high fructose corn syrup, I will look for that. Like I look for the ones that I know I don't want.
Mhm.
Like I really try to not have ingredients with like canola oil, or what's the other one? Safflower oil. I know those are highly industrialized seed oils that I opt to avoid. But I will say shopping at Aldi's, I try to be like so good about that, but there's stuff that I just truly want. And well, it's coded in that. So I'm like, shit. Well, I either like get this that I like want it, and I think generally across the board it'll be good for me, but there's still some ingredients in there that I don't agree with. So sometimes I just take that as a loss, but whatever. So those I try to avoid or, you know, limit. And what's a high fructose corn syrup? I'm trying to think of some other ones that I'm like, meh, meh, I don't want to see those. It'll come to me later. Oh wait, carrageenan.
Yeah, carrageenan or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one I try to avoid in like my milk alternatives or protein or whatever.
Mhm.
Aldi used to be so great about labeling, and over the last year since the pandemic, they've gotten really bad. I'm not gonna lie. I used to shop pretty much exclusively at Aldi, and they would mark things. They would mark sources of gluten even if they weren't wheat. And now like basically nothing is labeled unless it's certified gluten-free, which is really annoying.
That's interesting. I have not seen that at all.
Yeah, they used to have a lot of products that said it was gluten-free, even if it wasn't certified gluten-free. And like all the products that they used to have that said that, like they're slowly taking them all off. There's an Aldi gluten-free Facebook group. So that's how I know about a lot of them. Because I wouldn't have even noticed. I don't even, I buy it.
Interesting.
It's supposed to be gluten-free and then they take it off. So who knows?
I wonder like what happened with COVID, like why that went down.
I know they were having supply chain problems, I think. So that's probably why.
Yeah. You have to be really careful when cooking and processing the food too, because just like so things don't cross contaminate. And I bet it was harder to regulate with like less bodies and whatnot. That's wild.
Right.
And
sucks.
scary for you. Yeah, like that definitely sucks. Didn't they have like a gluten-free brand for a while as well?
They still have it. Yeah, it's Live free. It's decent.
Yeah.
And their wraps are like meh. But
oh yeah, the wraps suck. The bread, as far as gluten-free bread goes, the bread is okay. The bagels are good.
Yeah, it's decent. I definitely shopped a lot of like I went through a gluten-free phase and shopped a lot of that. And it was like hit or miss. And I think that's a lot of like the gluten-free products. It's getting a lot better.
Yeah.
But some things are still just like hit or miss. Like
I've been gluten-free for I think about 11 years now. So it's gotten way better than it used to be. It used to be like mostly everything was inedible. So
oh, absolutely. And you were like, dang, 11 years. So yeah, you saw Aldi's when it was like terrible gluten-free products. Like,
oh yeah,
they tasted so awful. Like I could never.
Yeah, it was like I would put it in my mouth and then just let it fall out. Like nope, not even swallowing.
Like Trader Joe's.
Trader Joe's though is actually has some really decent gluten-free stuff too. If I make it there.
But yeah, I just feel like they're a little bit like more expensive for like not that great. I just like them for their different like seasonal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like they have some crazy like cool products, and I'm like, yeah, I'll just go there to get just that. But
I definitely think though with that there's the gluten-free trend in itself. I think there's been a more push for gluten-free products. So I feel like that's why there's been such like a fast advance. I'd say within the past like 5 years. You would know better than me, Kristen, but
definitely. Yeah, oh yeah. But I mean, it's annoying on one side of things because you go to a restaurant and they say things are gluten-free, but then they make it in the same area as they're making,
right,
stuff with wheat. So cross-contamination is an issue like in that sense, but the availability of products has been like they make gluten-free Oreos now, guys. Like,
oh
yeah, they just came out last year. It's a life-changing event for me.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw everyone like posting about it.
Yeah. But yeah, when you haven't had Oreos in 11 years, it's like, it's nice to have one now and then.
I bet.
I'd say like the ice cream selection too has gotten a lot better.
Yeah, for sure. I like to make homemade ice cream, but it's kind of a lot of work. So
it's the best though. You can't beat it.
Really, it is.
You made a good point though when you said that it's hard, like in restaurants to know if something's truly gluten-free, but I think it shows like how hard it is to regulate the food system in general. Like it's it's pretty much guided by consumer demand and what's, trendy, and then they market it towards us, whether the claims are 100% accurate or not. So I definitely think like you guys know how to use food labels working with macros and everything, but the food content is still, hit or miss based on, does it really line up with its marketing? Like, is its marketing even like an accurate, you know, even accurate whatsoever? But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and I'm interested to see like how things will change in the near future with nutrition being more like emphasized in healthcare, or just a bigger push for nutrition in general. But yeah, sorry, I went off on a tangent with that, but it's just food's very hard to regulate, and we need food. It's basis of human survival, and food industries, the big money makers, it's hard for them to change their ways. So yeah, the rest of us just sort of have to follow suit. But I think knowing more about like what's on the label and how they're written, and the basis of what goes behind everything definitely helps us weigh out the bullshit from like science and what we really need. So but moving on, sorry, I know we're over time. I just wanted to hit these really fast because I feel like organic and natural are a very huge thing right now. So the USDA, there's a certified organic label through the USDA, and there's a huge long list of guidelines that these producers pretty much have to go through for them to be USDA organic. So, but overall, pretty much you can't use anything synthetic like fertilizers or the sewage sludge, any irradiation or use of GMOs. That's just like the big nuts and bolts. Those are prohibited. But natural is a very loose definition right now. It's a big marketing tool, if anything, but you can't use anything artificial or synthetic. That includes your color additives, regardless of the source. They can't be included or added to a food product's natural state, but it doesn't account for how that food is processed. So there's nothing standardized about this claim, about this label, because it doesn't really address how the food is produced, processed, manufactured, whether or not you can use pesticides, how to go about pasteurization or irradiation, etc. So take natural with a grain of salt, but organic, these producers have to go through a long list. They typically spend a lot more money in making these foods. So those I would trust definitely, but the natural you just sort of have to take with a grain of salt. So, and I've seen the natural label way more in the past few years than I have ever growing up. Like, I think it's very trendy. So any thoughts with this one?
Yeah, this is Greg. I feel like the environmental working group is an organization that I've like followed for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they have like this food scores app, and you can like scan the barcode and it'll tell you like what their rating is on like how organic or healthy it is.
Oh, wow. So it's like, how does it grade? Like, do you know? Is it just like in a database where they keep track of how it's produced, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's been a while since I like read it,
Uh-huh.
but I would have to go back and reread it to explain it. But I think it's one of those. It's kind of like golf, where like the lower the number, the better it is.
Okay, that's interesting. What's it called again? The environmental.
Environmental Working Group, EWG, and the app is called Food Scores.
Cool. I'm definitely gonna look into that. Do any of you like prefer organic? Like, what are your thoughts? Organic versus just standard food? personal
I
belief.
definitely try organic for like the Dirty Dozen. So that's like the 12 fruits, maybe even vegetables. I think it's vegetables too, that are in like the produce section. So I will try, like, I always try to get my bananas organic just to try to eliminate some possible pesticides or whatever. But I feel like I usually always try to go organic for most things. I've never really seen natural labels, to be honest. I always thought those were kind of like BS. So I always looked at the ingredients for those.
Yeah. If it's USDA stamped, it's pretty well approved, but I don't know, most of your Whole Foods won't have like your label on there, like your nutrition facts.
Right. Like I feel like your examples down there for like being on chip bags, I'm like, yeah, I've definitely seen that on chip bags, like
Yeah.
saying natural. But yeah, I would definitely say I try to opt for organic the most that I can, like with my produce items.
Yeah, I tend to, just personal preference, I honestly do what I can afford. If it's organic and similar, I typically go for organic if it's like the same price. And once, I don't know, when I'm older, more established, maybe I'll switch. But the dietitian in me, I've worked with a lot of people who can't afford food. So there's a big push for organic right now, but nutrients are absolutely the same across, if you have an organic banana or a banana that uses pesticides, the nutrients are going to be the same. But so I always try to have people keep that in mind. Like, organic is great if that's what you prefer, but you're also still going to get, the same amount of nutrients if you choose to go the other way as well. I'd rather you have the food, get the nutrients, and eat more versus, go organic and get less. But if you can do organic, go for it. And if that's what you want, that's amazing. So, but yeah, any other thoughts with that? Any other questions? I think I'll wrap this up after I open up the floor for some questions.
I don't know this for sure, but I feel like I've heard from a couple different people that the organic stuff, like they have organic pesticides that they have to get like certified. So even if you're doing like organic, you still have to, like, you're still not like pesticide free. You're just like avoiding the non-organic pesticide.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the word we're looking for is like synthetic versus natural. So like they can still use like natural pesticides because you have to like crowd control the bugs, right? But yeah, so nothing is pesticide free in nature. It's the content of the pesticides, I guess. So thanks for bringing that up. That's huge.
Well, thanks for validating it, because it's just something I heard. I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, no, you're right on the money.
That's a good point. So like, if you're trying to obtain and take in the cleanest products that you can, what do you feel like about, there's this, I forget who it's through. We had a client on here at one point in time, but she had this cleaner that she would bring home her like fruits and stuff to like clean it off from the grocery store. And it was some sort of product, maybe by like that oil, I can't remember, essential oils. They had this like cleaning product or something that you could use to clean your produce. What do you feel about that? Because, that is a risk, like somebody in my position where I am trying to eliminate the most amount of toxins possible, right? So like, even if I was living in a like mold, like if I have mold in my house right now or apartment, like that would be impacting my ability to heal and recover. So like something little and seemingly insignificant could be a huge problem for somebody with, I don't even want to say hormone imbalance because it's really more like a gut issue, but what do you feel like would be the best option in order to make your products clean if organic really isn't the end all be all for that?
Honestly, you'd have to send me that product, the essential oil product. I haven't heard of one, like I haven't seen one yet, but
Yeah.
honestly, I would just say washing your fruits and vegetables, like get a fruit and vegetable wash.
Yeah, it's something similar to that, like basically a fruit and veggie wash.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would say start there. But the cleanest way to eat is probably to grow your own food. And that's not super doable for everyone, but I would definitely say eat local when possible, like go to the farmer's market. The more foods, the more that foods travel, the less nutrients they have. And the more germs can get on them or, in them. So if we're eating avocados from California, that's okay because we don't have avocados here. Just know that they're going to probably be a little bit more nutrient dense in California or Mexico or so I would
That
just
makes
say
sense.
it's tough. There's nothing that's gonna be perfectly clean, especially when our food system is so big and we're mass producing for everybody. But yeah, I would wash your fruits and vegetables, buy foods in season.
That's a good
Because,
point. Yeah.
yeah, in season, local foods, they're not going to travel again as far as they normally would. So you won't get all the pollutants from that.
Can I request you to share something with us in the group chat? If you can, like find a resource for like what foods are in season right now, that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I was actually going to make my Caddy Lee Fitness post about seasonal.
Yay.
Okay. And then I can add in like the benefits and like why do
Yeah.
it. Because outside of like the nutrient content and just bioavailability and availability of foods, like they're cheaper and they're just easier to get. So
Right. Awesome. That would be super helpful.
yeah, I'll definitely do that. So any other questions, comments, concerns, something you'd want me to share in the group down the road, or next office hours topic, anything? Okay.
I think this was super helpful. And I like how we go off topic to like dive in deeper to stuff. Like honestly, like I know you're like, I feel like I'm, way far off topic, but I love that stuff because I feel like one thing leads to another conversation. And that's something that we wouldn't have got there if we didn't go off topic. So this was super helpful.
I'm glad.
Yeah, I agree.
The ad lib like conversations, like if you're thinking it, somebody else probably is too. So I think that's where most of like the learning and value comes from. So thanks for the participation and everything today, guys. I know some of it was really dry, so thanks for bearing with me a little bit, but I think we definitely had some good talks. So, but with that said, I won't keep you any longer if you guys don't have any questions, but you can always reach out to me in WhatsApp or what have you. So